Now Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all Israel had gone to Shechem to make him king. So when Jeroboam the son of Nebat heard it, they sent for him, for he was still in Egypt, for he had fled from King Solomon. Then Jeroboam and the whole congregation of Israel came and spoke to Rehoboam, saying, Your father made our yoke heavy. Now therefore lighten the burdensome service of your father and his heavy yoke which he put on us, and we will serve you. So he said to them, Depart for 3 days, then come back to me. And the people departed. Then King Rehoboam consulted the elders who stood before his father Solomon, and he said, How do you advise me to answer these people? They said, If you will be a servant to these people today, and serve them, and answer them, and speak good words to them, then they will be your servants forever. But he rejected their counsel, and asked the young men who had grown up with him. He said to them, What counsel do you give? How should we answer these people who have spoken to me, saying, Lighten a yoke which your father has put on us? Then the young men answered, This is how you should speak to this people who have spoken to you. My little finger shall be thicker than my father's waist, and though my father laid a heavy yoke on you, I will add to your yoke. My father chastised you with whips, but I will chastise you with scourges. So Jeroboam and all the people came to Rehoboam the 3rd day, as the king directed. Then the king answered the people roughly. So the king did not listen to the people, for the turn of affairs was from the Lord, that he might fulfill his word. Now, when all Israel saw that the king did not listen to them, the people answered the king, saying, What portion have we in David? We have no inheritance in the son of Jesse. To your tents, O Israel! Now see to your own house, O David. So Israel departed to their tents. But Rehoboam reigned over the children of Israel who dwelt in the cities of Judah. So Israel has been in rebellion against the house of David to this day. Israel sent for Jeroboam and made him king over all Israel. There was none who followed the house of David, but the tribe of Judah only. And Jeroboam said in his heart, Now the kingdom may return to the house of David, if these people go up to offer sacrifices in the house of the Lord at Jerusalem. Then the heart of this people will turn back to their Lord, Rehoboam, king of Judah, and they will kill me and go back to Rehoboam, king of Judah. Therefore the king took counsel and made 2 calves of gold, and said to the people, It is too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Here are your gods, O Israel, which brought you up out of the land of Egypt. And he set up one in Bethel, and the other he put in Dan. Now this thing became a sin, for the people went to worship before the one as far as Dan. He made shrines on the high places, and made priests from every class of people who were not of the sons of Levi. Jeroboam ordained a feast on the 15th day of the 8th month, like the feast that was in Judah, and offered sacrifices on the altar. And at Bethel he installed the priests of the high places which he had made. A summary of 1 Kings chapter 12.
And it all comes down to choice. There was single choices made by different individuals that play part. As we read through really 12 through 19 in the chapters, is just a riveting novel of how this thing unfolds, but there are choices that are being made. The core lesson is, of course, from Rehoboam, the king of the south, who should have been the king of all of Israel. That's the way, and instead is just the southern, is just Judah. And it all came down to a single choice. Choices are powerful things, and when a single choice can be something that can set the path of a life or a nation or, at least a significant period or season in your life. Just think even in our own lives, single decisions that can set the rest of the life, a tone going. It might be who you marry, who you don't marry in that decision. It could be that person coming out of a tavern and they're saying, and making a decision, am I sober enough to drive or not? And then they hit a family coming the other way in a car. Things like this, decisions, a single decision can carry a lot of weight. A pivotal decision can carry a lot of weight. In understanding the Old Testament, in that book, if you've been following along in it and you read a little bit in the textbook, Youngblood makes a curious statement. He talks about the monarchy of Israel really not starting till the time of Solomon. And some folks, as we studied, kind of were quizzically, well, we know that's not true. It started with Saul. We're 3 generations in by the time you hit Solomon. But he had a really good point, and it's important for us to understand the background on Rehoboam's decision. And the background is this, is that if we read through the Old Testament, especially those early books, we see Saul was a warrior king. He was a servant of the people. He went out, he fought alongside them. He did that side of it. David was a warrior king. He was that servant too. But things change. When we hit Solomon, you don't hear about Solomon going out with great battles. Instead, Solomon actually built the golden age of Israel, but it was on status, and the status came down to the status of the royalty. He was a great administrative king. He had projects, he built different things, especially the temple. The greatest temple Israel ever had was the first one built under Solomon. As a matter of fact, it's said when the second temple was built, that we go through history and destruction, that many people were weeping because the second temple was so much less than the first temple. So he had built this great temple. He had built the first great palace. He had built this luxury and opulence, and it was from that respect when other nations came, the status of Israel was based on the status of the sovereign, of the monarchy. And so that's what Youngblood was getting at, is that the opulence became part of the system when you hit Solomon. Now, even Solomon did so much work. He was like that entrepreneur who started out. He built the opulence. But by the time we get to Solomon's children, they were no longer even endeavoring for an opulence. It became merely an expected thing. We say that sometimes. Kids today, they expect the world handed to them on a gold platter. Well, it literally happened for his kids. That Rehoboam and all the entourage under Solomon, they grew up entitled. They were very self-entitled in their mentality. They weren't service entitled at all. This is where their hearts were. This is where their minds were. This is where their mentality was. So not surprising, when you look at it, is that when it came time to make a choice, here he is. He's going to try and make an objective choice. Rehoboam starts with the elders. The elders tell him, if you will be good to the people, if you'll be their servant, this type of thing. All they were doing was saying what we've already studied in the earlier parts of the book. With the first king, it was told, you're to be a servant of the people. You're to follow God. He's the true monarch. So that's the advice the elders gave. Rehoboam didn't care too much for that. So he asked all his young buddies, what do you guys think? How should I handle these people? And at this time, something else was going on, is that this other fellow, Jeroboam, he had left during Solomon's reign because Solomon had taxed them so heavy. Think about it. There was gold leafing on everything. Other nations would come and wow at all the stuff they set up. Well, you know what? Somebody had to pay for that. And how they paid for it was in heavy taxes. It must have felt like they were back in slavery, paying for all of this opulence to show off for other nations, to show off that way. So Jeroboam ran off to Egypt because Solomon, he was going to do away with him. He was in trouble, so he was exiled. So here we come, the new king comes to power, and he comes back and he offers to them a very straightforward thing. Lower the taxes, get real, and then everything will be cool. Just do that. So that's what Rehoboam has this decision to make with 3 days, okay? You folks tell me what you think. You folks tell me what you think. The elders say, listen to him, lower the taxes, be a servant of the people. But then his buddies that he grew up with, as self-entitled as he was, as rich as he was, as spoiled as he was, in all of this, they say, no, take the other approach. Tell these people, you think my father was bad, wait until you see the taxes I put on you. It was, I'm entitled to this. That was now the approach in all of this. So he makes this decision that splits the entire nation in two, never to be healed again. Well, it's not really surprising that he chose the way he did, considering how he was brought up. Hey, I'm entitled. This is all for me. The decision came from where he was. So there's lessons right here, starting with Rehoboam, learning good lessons from bad, or may we even say, even more important, ungodly decisions from godly ones in all of this. The first big lesson is this, is that we don't just make good and bad decisions. Some of it we say it's life skills, and all of that's true in that. But we just don't make good and bad decisions. Every decision we make is a product of the heart. It's where you are. It's in your mentality, in your thought, in your value. Well, it doesn't take much to connect the dots, then, does it? No matter what the situation is, if the heart is godly, the decision is most likely going to be a godly decision. If the heart is ungodly, if the heart's not connected with God, it's not going to make a godly decision. It's just common sense, isn't it? And that's why he rejected the godly advice, because his heart was not godly. And that's the big lesson from Rehoboam in this, is ungodly heart, expect that. The other lesson is a little bit scarier from Jeroboam. We already said his situation. He had already been in exile from Solomon, comes back. The guy is a representative for all these people. He's trying to be fair. He's trying to be optimistic. He's trying to be realistic, objective. Look, Rehoboam, here, let me just put it straightforward. If you want we will follow you forever. All you have to do is get reasonable with the taxes and be a servant of the people. All I'm asking. Very reasonable. And of course, the response was unreasonable. So Jeroboam and all of Israel fracture the nation, and they go north. And we'd think, well, that's a reasonable thing. Why not? Why not? Well, it sounds like a good decision, except for this. It was the end of the country. It killed the nation. It destroyed the nation. It became really ungodly really quickly. Lesson here, something can seem very reasonable. Very reasonable. And it has all kinds of good reasons not to do or to do something, except it doesn't have a godly reason. It doesn't have so reasonable, even in our own time. So reasonable. It's snowing out there a little bit. It's so reasonable not to risk it and come to church today. Well, sure, it's reasonable. It's reasonable. You come and there's that one person in the church and they offended you and they said something they shouldn't have said, and boy, you have every reason to just be offended and never go back to that place again. Reasonable, but is that a godly decision? Especially when we look at how many times somebody will drift away from a fellowship and not return anywhere. Is that really a godly thing to do? And this is a thing that we learn from Jeroboam, is that he had good reason, it just wasn't a godly reason, and it showed in the consequences. Lessons from the Old Testament that carry off in the New Testament. Is it possible? Yeah. Rehoboam or Jezebel, all they had to do was have a hard enough heart, and they started making some very ungodly decisions. And as we look at Jeroboam, we see that it was step by step away from them, and many of the steps seem so reasonable. They were, even maybe in some places you might call politically good choices, they just weren't godly choices. Why weren't they godly choices? Because they weren't coming from a godly heart, and the consequences weren't godly. All of this stuff plays together. It can be the same thing within a church. It can be the same thing in your walk. It can be the same thing for a fellowship together. We can all fall into this. Has a church ever split? Has there ever been a part that fell into apostasy? Has there ever been this type of thing going on? It can happen. It can be things that even seem rewarding at the time. Or maybe it's fatigue talking to us, or other things that are causing us to see it as reasonable. It is, maybe, but it's just not godly. And so the godly can't happen. Bottom line from all of this, from Rehoboam, from Jeroboam, from Jezebel, from Elijah, lessons we can take is this. An ungodly heart is destined to make ungodly decisions. An ungodly heart is destined to make ungodly decisions. And ungodly decisions will inexorably take you to an ungodly place. And ungodly decisions will take you to an ungodly place. But here's the twist. In our ungodly place, it isn't God who dies. It's us. It's you, it's me, it's our culture. It is us who dies. What's the proof? Look at Israel. Look what happened there. All from the Old Testament, proven over thousands of years, into the New Testament, into our lives today. These principles still hold. They still hold, still proven. Leads us to one big question. How godly is your heart? If you're concerned with godly decisions, start there. How godly is your heart? Now, I'm not asking how godly is your mouth, although it's good to have a godly mouth. But we're not, how godly are your hands? Not asking. You can be very busy about church stuff. Good for you. That's not a bad thing either. But it all starts with this. How godly is your heart? That's the maker or breaker of everything else. It was for Israel. It is for the church. It is for the culture. It is for you and me.